Welcome to the Radical Responsibility Revolution podcast. This is where we are transforming lives, inspiring you to reclaim your health, your wealth, and the power of your mind. Here we share actionable insights, inviting you to turn inwards and design your life of purpose and abundance. Beautiful souls, welcome back to another fierce truth-telling episode of the Radical Responsibility podcast. As you know, I'm your host, the Debbie Dobbins, Queen of Magic, and today I'm diving into the fire, literally. I've been holding my tongue for a little while now, watching the unfolding of this new administration. And the fact is that I'm just so blown away by some of the rhetoric that goes on out there. And yet I want to begin to dissect this a little bit because I just finished sharing from my book, Your Inner Billionaire, with my people in my course, that language is so important. Everything you say is a mini prayer. So when you begin to say words like Hitler, fascist, Nazi, and you fling them around as if they are just everyday words, it then, number one, it normalizes that that's okay, number one. But number two, it's like throwing out confetti of negativity. And I want to begin to dissect these words because I think it's really, really important that people begin to understand that these words are powerful words. They have meaning. And if you're not using them appropriately, you are doing a disservice not only to yourself, but to the world at large. Words have power. And so when you begin to look at them historically and you then also share them like they're just normal words, it's very, very reckless. And I want to get this really straight, real fast. Donald Trump is not Hitler. There was one Hitler. He was a scourge on our planet, and Donald Trump is not him. Donald Trump is also not a fascist. He's also not a Nazi. And if we're going to reclaim clarity in a world who's absolutely obsessed with distortion, we have to begin by telling the truth. And the truth is that I want to give you some insight because I've been on the planet for quite some time. I have friends who have been through the Holocaust, and this is not what we are going through. And when we begin to have a dialogue about that truth from the perspective of what is fascist, a Nazi, Hitler, you begin to unpack what these words actually mean. So how Hitler and the Nazi Party really rose to power is not what's happening now, and yet it's being conflated as if it is. What fascism and socialism are, and most importantly, how none of that aligns with what's happening in America right now. I find it very fascinating that these words are thrown out. And if you were to ask the people that are protesting and holding up signs that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are Nazis and fascist and, oh my goodness, all of the rhetoric that goes on, I want you to begin to realize that once again, your words have power, not only in your personal life, but in the global perspective. And what's happening is not aligning with what happened then and what's happening now, but more importantly, with those labels. So I'm going to walk boldly into this one. This is a solo podcast because I believe that it's time to have a conversation around it. And all of the media outlets, whether you're on the version that says that's what he is, or you're on another version that says, oh, isn't that interesting how they keep saying that? Nobody's breaking this down of how did Hitler really come into power, what happened, and how that is absolutely not what Donald Trump is doing. Actually, on the contrary, it's what is happening on the left. So think of it. I want to rewind to Germany post World War I. Germany was humiliated. They were economically devastated and suffering from hyperinflation. Gee, that sounds familiar, right? But here's what happens is when you can take circumstances like that, that's a prime opportunity for somebody to come along and take advantage of that. Well, so back then, the Treaty of Versailles had crushed them, and people were desperate for leadership. Gee, doesn't that sound like something we're going through? Yes. So you could have an opportunity to take advantage of people, and yet that is not what happens here. That is what happened with Hitler. And in that chaos, Adolf Hitler rose because he was a charismatic speaker who understood how to manipulate emotion and blame. Now, I want to begin to compare this to what's actually happening on the left. They know how to manipulate emotion and blame. So right now they're manipulating your emotions of, oh, poor people are being done to this and this is happening to them, and blaming Donald Trump. So think about this really. It's very interesting how sometimes the finger is pointed, but it's really the other side that's pointing the finger who's actually doing the things that are being purported to be done by somebody else. So what Hitler did was he blamed Jews, communists, and basically anyone who didn't fit the Aryan model, right? So what's happening here is the left is blaming anyone who doesn't fit their model. The model of, if you don't believe this way, then you're not going to be part of our group. What happened was Hitler did that exact thing through fear, through propaganda, and oh, by the way, violence. Violence. So interestingly, what's happening now with the left, and I've done some deep diving with AI to research, the left seems to be the only um, institutions or groups that love purporting violence when they're trying to get their point across. So I find that very fascinating that Hitler used fear, propaganda, and violence so that he could climb to power. Who's doing that right now? Who's actually doing the fear, the propaganda, and the violence? It's not Donald Trump. It is not Donald Trump. But what happens is there was this Reichstag fire. It was a very convenient crisis that Hitler used to push the Enabling Act through, which is what he passed back then. But interestingly enough, it seems like it's so similar to burning down Tesla dealerships, right? They they are trying to explain that this is Trump being Hitler-ish when I'm looking at it going, oh my gosh, no, that's exactly what the left is doing with your emotions, with your feelings, with your thoughts. And what ended up happening was he silenced the press, outlawed political parties, and created a police state. Well, we don't have the police state yet, although we might need it because of all the protesting and the violent protesting. But what happened during the last 4 years was the press was silenced, right? They were silenced to tell us that Joe Biden was on his game. But that's not what was happening. So now what you have is the community, our country has stopped believing the mainstream press, and then created blogs, created podcasts, created all of these other things so that people can get their information from someplace. Hopefully, you'll get some information today from someplace that's different than the mainstream press. So look at this really clearly. If we want to call the pot and the kettle black, maybe you want to look at where you're pointing your finger, because that's exactly what the left has been doing. That is Nazism. So what did he do? He then started concentration camps, the gas chambers, the Holocaust, and frankly, that is genocide. Nazism is genocide. It's totalitarian control and it's racial cleansing. None of that is happening except for trying to tell our community, our world, our United States of America that they are Nazis and fascists when they don't support but things that they don't believe in, whether they don't believe in it religiously because it's about boys playing in girls sports, or that you don't support deporting people that came into our country illegally. I think it's very interesting that the finger is being pointed at Donald Trump and his crew about being a Nazi and a fascist and a Hitler, when the reality is that is exactly the genocide that's happening right here, right now in our country, with the left screaming from the top of their lungs that this is what's actually happening. None of that exists in Trump's America. None of that exists. So I want to talk about fascism, because that's another word that gets thrown around, that there is fascism going on in America. Fascism is authoritarianism wrapped in a flag. And then it's fused with absolute control of states and citizens. So I want you to begin to think of Mussolini. Think military parades, silencing dissent, state controlled media, and a dictator at the top. Now, who does that remind you of? The mainstream media for the last 4 years. We aren't having military parades. Actually, they're having those in China, where we're trying to take ourselves away from them and stop being on the teat, if you will, of communist China. No one gets excited about communist China doing the things that they do to us, except for, oh, I don't know, Donald Trump right now. And the fact is that the media has been so controlled by the left that now it's so challenging to extract yourself from that constant brainwashing. And if you think about Donald Trump, love him or hate him, he has never silenced the media. Yes, maybe he's thrown a couple of them out of the White House press room, much to their chagrin, so that they could have a bigger tent. But the fact is that he's had more airtime of the press criticizing him than any human being ever on the planet. Ever. He's never tried to dissolve Congress. He's actually working with Congress to pass laws, just like all of his predecessors before him, that have wanted to make a shift and a change in our country. He's never sent the military to break down protests. Actually, what he does is he uses leverage, the power of the purse. Because the fact of the matter is that we have lost all input, if you will, into how we pay our taxes into these generational government entities that are not good stewards with our money. So why are we allowing that to happen? I did a video on my YouTube channel about that. I stopped paying taxes. I stopped paying taxes when I was in my late 20s because the government's not good stewards with our money. Even way back then, they weren't good stewards with our money. But what is Trump doing? He's holding press conferences in the open and being completely transparent, opening cabinet meetings so that you can see and hear him directly speaking to the American people without a filter. He doesn't need handlers. He doesn't need his wife sitting at the top of the cabinet meeting table. This is not fascism. That's actually very interesting that that would even be a choice of words, because if you look at what true fascism is, look at Mussolini. What Donald Trump does is transparent. It's not these labels that have been touted over and over and over by people that don't even know what those words mean. The real silencing, it came from big tech, right? We now have seen all the big tech guys come to meet with Trump, and Mark Zuckerberg out there saying, "Oh yes, I was silenced by Joe Biden's group." Well, I'm not sure that's true or not, but it is so clear that what we perceived was going on was actually going on. That big tech was letting you only see what was supposed to be seen according to the people that were running the organizations. We are getting silenced from universities. Think of all the protests that are going on and what the big controversy is about the funding going into these universities being withheld by the federal government is because they're discriminating against Jews. Oh my gosh. What does that remind you of? What does that remind you of? Oh, I don't know. Hitler, right? So if you think about it, where is the true Hitler, the real fascism, the real Nazism? It's what the left is doing right now. So from anyone who dared question the narrative, right, that's been going on for the past 10 years at least, what happened? They got canceled. They got censored or they got demonized. That is fascism. That is Nazism. That's where the modern day suppression is happening. So if you begin to use your critical thinking, that's all this is. I'm not here to tell you, support Donald Trump right now, because I know that that's too big of a leap for most of you. But the fact is that if you don't start having critical thinking, turn off the pundits, do your own research, you will be lost and you will continue to live in this state of perpetual fear. I frankly have lived in fear for the last 4 years, not understanding how we could be treated the way that we've been treated more in a socialism fashion, because socialism, according to AOC and the squad, if you will, isn't the savior. So let's talk about socialism. It sounds really noble, right? Equality for everybody. Oh, Lord, okay. Everybody is not equal as far as their talents and their treasures and their abilities, but socialism in practice turns power into the hands of the few and suffering for the many. Think about socialist countries, right? Venezuela. Oh my gosh, nobody wants to live in Venezuela. It's horrible. The USSR, Russia. Those are socialist countries. China, Mao's China was socialist. Now it's just communist. But this history tells the truth. And if you're following these leaders, which are, that's sort of a loose word for these Democrats right now, but if you're following the history of socialism, and then you're following these people, I just don't even know what to think, because what that is saying is, and frankly, they're very hypocritical. It's, not, don't be a billionaire, don't be a millionaire, when that's exactly what they are, flying around in private jets. I find it very fascinating, the hypocrisy that goes on when people are trying to scare you to death. Because here in America, we have politicians lionizing these models, calling it progress. The progressives, if you will. Oh my goodness gracious. These are not progressive ideas. These are backward ideas that do not work. And to say that we should give away free college, free housing, free healthcare, how do you plan to fund it? If the last 4 years have shown you nothing, nothing, other than an overextension of money going into debt and then printing more money causes inflation, I don't know why you would even begin to think about how we are not going to survive if we keep giving away free. What that means is the people that actually are making money are going to be so heavily taxed that they're going to just stop working. How do they plan to fund all of this free everything? That is the epitome of socialism. But what you get is not a middle class, not an upper class. You get a bottom line of everybody just struggling to survive. And I've written a book called Your Inner Billionaire, which is about freedom. It's about the freedom to choose how you want to show up in your life and know that you are innately abundant. This socialism plan does not tell you you are innately abundant. It says that you are just a grunt going here, going there. And if you just don't want to work at all and you're going to uh, live off the teat of the federal government, who is going to pay for that? The people that are going to pay for that is not going to continue that extensively. Your money, your labor, all of that is about socialism that will keep you downtrodden. And so, what is Trump doing in contrast? He wants to reduce the taxes for the middle class. He wants to pull back regulatory chokehold on small business. Small business keeps our country thriving. He wanted Americans empowered, not dependent on somebody to make their lives whatever it is. Problem is that when you begin to be empowered with yourself, when you show up in the world and you know that you are creating your own experience, that gives you power. But when you feel like you have to depend on a government to help you survive, that is not lifting anybody up. That is keeping everybody down. And what does it serve to keep people down? Power over. That is not what Donald Trump is trying to do. The real danger is all this rhetoric versus the responses that's coming. So let's talk about what's really, really dangerous. The rhetoric of calling Donald Trump or Elon Musk or anybody else Hitler is where we begin to have the wheels fall off of the wagon. The response that we're getting are riots, campus mobs, literal anti Semitism exploding at elite institutions. This is what we saw with Hitler and his Nazis. And if these protests are targeting if these protests were targeting Black Americans or women instead of Jews, they'd be called hate crimes, right? Just because they're protesting the Jews, we all of a sudden think that that's perfectly okay to be taught on our most elite university campuses. I am absolutely blown away and floored by that because that is the epitome of Nazism, the epitome of it. So instead of pointing one finger at Donald Trump, look at the other three that are pointing back at you because it's coming from the left labeled as activism. This isn't resistance, it's repression. Listen to this word, repression. This is what the left does better than anything, and that is to repress you so that you are in fear, you don't think for yourself, and then you go out and experience all of this violence. It echoes how the Nazi Party actually started. The Nazi Party didn't begin with tanks. They began with propaganda. Gee, does that sound familiar? All the propaganda that the left is feeding to you. Be in fear, be in fear, be in fear. A constitutional crisis, the rule of law, due process. Oh my goodness. It didn't begin with those tanks. It began with the propaganda in Hitler's era. Scapegoating. Oh my goodness. The left does that so well. It's all Donald Trump's fault. It's all his cabinet's fault. It's all the MAGA people's fault. Everybody's to blame except for them because that is shutting down over time the opposing voices. Sound familiar? Gee, golly gosh. It's exactly what's happening on the left. Except now it's not a far right takeover. It's radical, progressive, canceling dissent. That's all it is. So until you begin to see it for what it is, you will continue to follow the mob mentality because Trump is standing up for Israel, right? This is what's so amazing is that we're comparing Trump to a Nazi and to fascism. All of the things that he stands for are 100% the opposite of that. He's standing up for Israel. He's standing up for women. Oh my gosh. I feel like I am so excited that there's somebody in the White House actually that cares about women. He's standing up for manufacturing jobs, for the middle class. He's here to support the working person. He doesn't want to control your life. He wants to get government and himself out of the way so that you can build the life that you want, that you desire, that you deserve. And as an abundance teacher and also as a leadership trainer for years, traveling the world, I would I would have loved to have held Donald Trump up as the example of a wonderful CEO. He is now the CEO of America. He's got all of this business experience. And what I can share is that politicians don't have business experience. As being a business owner for so many decades, it's a different mindset. But now he's the CEO of America, the biggest company on the planet. And he understands the idea of business, and he runs the United States like it's a company in a beautiful way, having his board meetings, which are the executive meetings, out there, upfront, efficient. He's direct. He's results oriented. All of these things are such beautiful qualities of a CEO. And yes, he's bold. He's bold. Do I agree when he says, name calling and bullying? Of course not. Of course not. That's 100% against everything that I believe. But here's the thing, and somebody said this many, many years ago when he was first running, is would you like to have the best surgeon that's going to cure your cancer or whatever ailment you happen to have that has a really shitty bedside manner? Or do you want the person that has a really good bedside manner but doesn't know what the hell they're doing? I want the person, I don't care about their bedside manner, if they are going to cure me or heal me or whatever. So, do you have to love everything about the way he shows up? Maybe you don't like his personality style. It doesn't matter because he's an incredible leader. He is, as I said, efficient, direct, and results oriented. That is the type of person that I want running my companies, but more importantly, how I want my country to be run. Contrary to popular opinion, he doesn't want to be king. He doesn't want a throne. He wants a functional economy. And if you've never studied the economy, right, you just have no clue about it. Of course, tariffs are scary to you. The thing about it is that because it's not something that we're used to experiencing, we don't understand it, it scares people. And would I say that he's done the best job of trying to communicate with us what a tariff is? Probably not. But he doesn't want worship. He wants accountability. He wants accountability from the entire world to look at the United States of America with respect. So, because he's criticized in public, in print, in protests, he still shows up. He still speaks and he still serves. This is the beauty of a real leader. He's not succumbing to all of the noise and all of the rhetoric. And that's not what dictators do. They don't do those things. Dictators disappear their enemies. And I'm not going to get into Abrego Garcia, but the fact is that he's not disappearing people. He's not disappearing people. He's right up front. Everybody can see exactly what's happening, and you can like it or not like it, but he's going to debate you. He's going to tell you why he's doing what he's doing, and he doesn't allow this nonsense to keep him stuck. Dictators close their borders to truth. Trump opens the microphone. He's not trying to erase history. He's trying to make sure that we're not repeating the same mistakes that we've made over and over and over. So I want to make a call to clarity for anybody that's listening to this podcast. When you throw out a word like Nazi to score political points, you do two things. Number one, more important than anything, you are dishonoring the real victims of that history. The Jews that had to experience those horrors, you are dishonoring them by calling that word out when you have no idea what you're talking about. The second thing you do is you dull our awareness of real authoritarian threats, like censorship. We've had a lot of that in the past 10 years. Surveillance. Oh my gosh. We're being surveilled 24/7. And state sanctioned discrimination, which is not what Donald Trump is doing. He is not the threat. He's the spotlight. He's the spotlight on the threat. So let's all rise above the rhetoric. Let's get back to facts. Let's stop the name calling and start asking real questions. Asking real questions. Because you know what? Truth doesn't scream. It stands in its power. So all the screaming and all the rhetoric is there to distract you. Truth stands in its power. And if you begin to look at the truth, what those words mean, where they originated from, and how they are not even remotely close to what Donald Trump is doing, as a matter of fact, they are a mirror for what is happening with all the name calling people and the rhetoric that is going on. I promise you, if you do your own research, don't believe me, believe the truth. Stop listening to the press rhetoric. That is the first thing you want to do. I really appreciate you walking through the fire with me today. And if this has resonated with you at all, share it in the comments. Speak up because courage is contagious. And history is watching this. History, your children's children will look back at this and how did you stand on this? Because if you are in this space right now in history, you have an opportunity to stand in truth, the truth which is love and communication and connection and support and good stewardship of our money and allowing everybody to be as empowered as they are from the day that they're born to be and do and have whatever it is that they choose and not be oppressed by this whole notion of let's be socialist and I'll get along, because that's never going to happen. So until next time, keep living in your power and never let the noise drown out your knowing. Queen of Magic out. Welcome to the Radical Responsibility Revolution podcast. This is where we are transforming lives, inspiring you to reclaim your health, your wealth, and the power of your mind. Here we share actionable insights, inviting you to turn inwards and design your life of purpose and abundance.